Hi boys and girls, how are you today? I'm sitting outside. Can you recognize where I am? Can you see? That's the cornfield right outside of the church. I was in my office today and I was so cold, believe it or not, and I said, I'm going to go outside and do the Sunday school lesson outside and warm up a little bit. Well, I sure hope you're enjoying your summer vacation. And the last few weeks in our curriculum, we've been talking about different things that we do during our summer vacations, whether we go to the beach or go to museums, we have picnics, all the different fun things that we do. Well, this week's lesson is talking about summer camp. How many of you have gone to summer camp this summer? I know some of you have, but I also know that a lot of camps have been canceled and people weren't able to go to camp this summer because of COVID. But I know when I was a kid, I went to camp every summer, and I absolutely love summer camp. There was many things I loved about it. I loved the horseback riding. I loved swimming in the pond. I loved the rope swing over the pond. And I loved being in the cabins, campfires, hikes, all the fun things that you do when you go to church camp. But I think one of the favorite things that I enjoyed was my friends. And a lot of times I would go to camp and my close friends didn't go to camp with me, but I would make new friends just about every time I went. And when you make a friend, whether it's somebody that you see all the time or somebody that you just meet, generally you become friends when you realize you have something in common or something that brings you together, like being at church camp, or maybe you have a friend at church, or you have a friend in your neighborhood. But there's something that you have in common that brings you together. Well, we're going to talk about two people today that became friends, and they were kind of an unlikely pair. It's in the Old Testament, the book of 1 Samuel, and we're going to start in chapter 19. And these two people were David and Jonathan. Now, probably many of you are familiar with David. David was a shepherd boy. He was the one that fought against Goliath. Some of the things we already know about David. But David was a shepherd, right? Well, his friend was Jonathan. And Jonathan and David really didn't have much in common to begin with, because David, like I said, was a shepherd boy, but Jonathan was the son of the king, and that was King Saul. Well, what does a king, the son of a king, which would be a prince, what does he have in common with just a poor shepherd boy? Well, they got to be friends, and they just enjoyed each other's company. They liked being together. They enjoyed spending time together. But Jonathan and David were very, very loyal to each other. And there is a story in, like I said, 1 Samuel chapter 19, and I'm going to read it to you. It says this: Now Saul told Jonathan his son and all his servants to put David to death. Now, why would King Saul want to kill David? Well, the reason he wanted to kill David was because God had chosen David to become the next king of Israel. Now, that shouldn't have happened, because actually it should have been Jonathan that would become the next king after his dad, Saul, died. That's how the natural progression of things went. But God had chosen David to become king. So there's another reason why it was kind of odd that Jonathan was had such a close relationship with David, because he should have been jealous of David, because David was kind of taking his place as the next king. But Jonathan loved David, and they were very good friends. Well, anyway, so Saul wanted to kill David. But in verse 1 it says, But Jonathan, Saul's son, greatly delighted in David, or just said that he really liked him and he was his best friend. So Jonathan told David, saying, Saul, my father, is seeking to put you to death. Now therefore, please be on guard in the morning and stay in a secret place and hide yourself. I will go out and stand between my father in the field where you are, and I will speak with my father about you. If I find out anything, then I will tell you." So Jonathan was going to kind of figure out what his dad was going to do, find out, and then he was going to tell David so David would be safe. Then Jonathan spoke well of David to Saul his father and said to him, "Do not let the king sin against his servant David, since he has not sinned against you, and since his deeds have been very beneficial to you. For he took his life in his hands and struck the Philistine." Do you remember who that was? Yeah, that was Goliath. "And the Lord brought him about a great deliverance for all of Israel. And you saw it, and you rejoiced. Why then will you sin against the innocent blood by putting David to death without cause?" So Jonathan was pleading with his father, King Saul, "Don't put David to death. You remember, you saw what he did with Goliath and how he defended and saved the people of Israel from Goliath and the Philistines." Well, Saul listened. This is verse 6. Saul listened to the voice of Jonathan, and Saul vowed, "As the Lord lives, he shall not be put to death." Then Jonathan called David, and Jonathan told him all these words. And Jonathan brought David to Saul, and he was in his presence as formerly. Well, that was during our early part. Well, then later, Saul continued to want David to be killed. But Jonathan was very loyal to David, and David was loyal to Jonathan. Later on, Jonathan dies, but Jonathan had a son. And because they were such good friends, David promised Jonathan that he would take care of his family and all of his children and make sure that they were always safe. And so that's exactly what happened. He took care of Jonathan's son, whose name was Mephibosheth. Isn't that a great name? I just love that name. Very hard to say, but he took care of Mephibosheth. And Mephibosheth was a young man who had kind of a disability. He wasn't able to walk real well. He had an injured legs from when he was a young boy. He would have been dropped by his caretaker, and his legs were not right, and it was hard for him to walk. But David took care of Jonathan's son for the rest of his life and brought him into the palace to live with him. So Jonathan and David were very, very, very good friends. I think it was really interesting that this was the lesson for this week, because this morning, well, actually last night and this morning, I had a visit from a very good friend of mine. And this was a friend that we grew up next door to each other in Topeka, Kansas. And our houses were real close together. We shared a driveway between the two houses. We did everything together. Her name was Renee, and we played all the time. We played dolls on the front porch. We slept over at each other's houses from the time we were about first grade all the way through high school and college, and then eventually we got married, and the rest is history, kind of, as they say. But Renee and I have been good friends for a long time. She's lived all over the world in different places. She was a missionary for a little while. But now she's back in Kansas, which is where I grew up as well. And she and her husband, and she has 9 children. Wow, can you imagine having 9 brothers and sisters? Pretty crazy. But anyway, she and her husband, we have been friends all this time. And we don't see each other a lot, but when we see each other, it's like we've never been apart. And I think that's kind of like David and Jonathan. And I hope that someday, or maybe now even, you have a friend like that you can have for your whole entire lifetime. Well, you know what? David and Jonathan, their friendship, that teaches us some things about friendships. And God wants us to have friendships. He wants us to have people in our life that really pour into us and encourage us and help us in our life and in our walk with the Lord. It's very important. Well, the first thing that it teaches us is that true friends, focus on what they have in common. You know, you can have a friend, and you may not agree on everything, but if you focus on the most important things, it can be very, very exciting. There's one of my friends right now.
I locked my keys in my car, so I have to wait for my neighbor.
Oh no! There's one of my friends. She's in the parking lot. That's Easton and Landon's mom. Anyway, so here we go. So true friends focus on what they have in common. They may have differences, but that doesn't matter. Like we said, David was a poor shepherd boy, and Jonathan was actually the son of a king, but they had so much in common. And David didn't look at Jonathan's wealth as being a problem. They just enjoyed each other's company. They set aside their differences. You know, we kind of laugh at some of the differences that you might have with your friends. Like, how many of you like Pepsi? Yeah, and then how many of you like Coke? Now, most people that like Pepsi, they don't like Coke, or vice versa. If you like Coke, you don't like Pepsi. But if your friend really likes Pepsi and you really like Coke, that's not a difference that's going to keep you from being friends, right? No, it's really a silly difference, and who cares? So you focus on what you have in common, not necessarily the things you don't agree on. The second thing that friends do is they're loyal to one another. They stick together no matter what. Even if sometimes somebody can make you a little mad or you're not getting along very well, but you're loyal to that friendship and you want to be friends for life. And they were faithful to each other, David and Jonathan, even to the end. And he did everything. Jonathan did everything to protect David. And then David promised to protect Jonathan's family after he was gone. And then the third lesson we can learn from David and Jonathan is that they keep their word to each other. David and Jonathan pledged to always be friends and respect each other. And even when David became king, he had the chance to fulfill that promise by taking care of his disabled son in the palace. So I hope, as you think about friendships, that you really realize that friendships are important. And the most important thing for us to have in common with our friends is that we love Jesus. And I'm not saying that you can't have a friend who maybe doesn't know Jesus yet, and it's important for us to be friendly and be nice to people who don't know Jesus. We need to do that. But it's very important that your best friends, people that you spend a lot of time with, and people that you're loyal to, it's important for them to have that one thing in common with you, that they know Jesus. I told you about my friend Renee. You know, and through the years, even when we were little, one of the most important things that kept us together was our love for Jesus. And we realized that Jesus is the most important thing in our life. And that's kept us together and keeps us always focused on Jesus and what he's doing in our lives. And now when we get together, we talk about all the things that God has done for us. And it's such a wonderful thing. So I hope that even during this time where we can't be together at church and you're listening to lessons online, and you certainly can't be together with all of your friends from church, that you remember to pray for each other. Remember the kids that were in your class. Pray for them. And we want to pray especially that this COVID disease goes away soon, right? That people are healed from it and that the number of cases gets reduced so that we can come back together safely and have fun with our friends again. But remember that God wants us to have friends. And the most important thing to have in common with your friend is that you love Jesus and that you encourage each other, your friends, to love Jesus more and more every day. Isn't that great? It is such a wonderful blessing to have a friend who loves Jesus as much as you do. So I hope you're enjoying the summer vacation, and we would be very excited to be together again when we can. But please know that we here at Faith Community Church in Children's Ministry are praying for you. Your teachers are praying for you, and we hope that you're doing well. All right, well, you guys have a great week, and we'll see you next time. Bye.